We are live now.
Great.
Good morning, good evening, good afternoon. Welcome everyone. I hope you are having a great second day at TestMu. I'm 𝒄𝒏𝒄𝒆 and I will be hosting this keynote session. This is a special session for us and I'm extremely proud to introduce you to the speaker of today's session. He is an open source enthusiast and contributor to various libraries in quality ecosystem. He is a contributor to Selenium project and is also the member of project leadership committee for Selenium. He is an Appium contributor too. He is passionate about sharing his knowledge and delivered keynote special sessions at Selenium Conference, STEPin, SLASSCOM, apart from various other technical talks around the world. He is an avid accessibility practitioner and also voluntary member for W3C ACT-R. He is one of my mentor and an amazing advisor. And I'm extremely lucky to be working with him here at lambdatest, where he is leading developer relations. And today he is going to talk about Selenium and the future. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Manoj Kumar. The stage is all yours, Manoj.
Thank you, Sparsh. Hello, everyone. Good to be back again, but on the different side of the stage. Think past 2 days have been used to what Sparsh was doing until now, being at the backstage. But good to be back on this side of the stage, which I'm so much used to, and can't wait to start sharing my screen and talk all about my favorite topic ever, about Selenium 4. Let me start doing that. Just give me a buzz if everything looks okay.
Your screen is
Yep.
awesome.
Okay, cool. As usual, folks, please keep the chat interactive. And if I'm able to finish the talk a little early, you could ask any questions that are related to Selenium 4 or any general questions related to automation. All right, let's get started. Gonna cut short my introduction because Sparsh gave a very long version of my introduction. Thanks, Sparsh, being kind enough. Great to have you in my team as well. All right, Selenium 4 and the future. All right, so the agenda is very lean. We're gonna start looking at Selenium 4, deep dive into features straight away. No history, no behind what's happening. In the past, Selenium 2 or Selenium 3. Directly jump onto Selenium 4. So these are some of the key features that we have been adding as part of Selenium 4, which I wanted to cover. I'm sure some of you would have already tried that. If you've already done that, that's great. We welcome any feedback that you might have, or if you're someone new who have been hearing about it, reading some blogs but haven't really got a time to try it out yourself, please tune in. I'm going to show some live demos today. I haven't recorded any videos, so hopefully the demo gods are with me today. So we're going to look at all about relative locators, DevTools protocol mainly, and specifically around web authentication, geolocation, network interception, all cool stuff related to DevTools protocol. I know in the past, sessions, and yesterday we had a couple of sessions that talk about WebDriver BiDi, DevTools protocol. I know there's a thin line of difference between these stuff, and there's no clear definition of. So I'll try to have that distinction between these protocols, how to use and when to use these APIs, so that you could go ahead and use it however you'd like, cautiously. And mainly about observability, which is one of the interesting features that I'm really looking forward to in Selenium 4, and what the future will hold for Selenium as a tool itself. If you ask me what is the tipping point in Selenium 4, I would say observability, because that's one of the features that I always look forward, given the advent of microservices and everything. Um, and of course, I wanted to cover a little bit about the future, which is looking like, it'll go in the direction of WebDriver BiDi again, which is something that we've already, I think Christian put forward a brilliant slide distinguishing between the standard, the non-standard, and the BiDi, the future version of, how the standard teams are working towards taking forward in bringing a true cross-browser platform. And I'll also touch upon some Selenium project initiatives. Cool. With that, let's get started. First up, Selenium 4. Well, I think this slide is something that I've made up after bringing up all the other demos, right? So, which I thought it would be nice to step back and see what really happened. So, if you look at Selenium 4, we have been promising that we will deliver Selenium 4, and it took really 3 years, right? I mean, I don't know if it's. I think we promised we will release during Chinese New Year. Simon made a joke. I think it has been carry forwarding from Selenium 3 version. It was Christmas, and then for Selenium 4, it was Chinese New Year. But finally, we have released it, and it's been over already. Selenium 4.3.0 is there, and I think we did shipped away a lot of features on top of it, and it took a massive amount of effort for the overall team, including Simon, Alexei, Chimevans, Titus, Tiago, and recently, very recently, James, Boni, a lot of people stepping in, Pooja, David Burns, myself, Sriharsha, a lot of these people, right? Um, I think nearly 4,000 plus commits. It's not easy task, and we originally designed Selenium 4 to be a drop-in replacement for Selenium 3. What does it really mean is that as a user, you wouldn't have most of things to change in your test script. It's even though we have deleted a lot of code. That's for sure. What pleasure you have more than deleting a code that is not being used for a very long time. So we have done that, and I think architecturally we have made some huge changes to Selenium Grid, which I'll cover in a few slides, which is all about the observability, which we will have it, and some massive amount of work that has also been gotten into Shadow DOM, for which we have onboarded some external developers. If my memory serves right, Igalia, I think helped us ship some code out Shadow DOM, and Titus has some brilliant blog on how to use Shadow DOM within Selenium, and I'm going to show some demo over it as well if time permits, and the demo got with me. And last but not least, WebDriver by Day has been the way forward, and also has been one of the major changes that we have made and we're still making as part of Selenium 4. And last but not the least, Simon stepping away. Personally, for me, I lose his support, but nevertheless, the team is, we will have people coming and going, but Simon has a special place for everyone in the community. For myself, has been a mentor, and I've learned a lot from him. Simon, definitely missing you, and I know you're still around the Slack channel, and he's actually in Berlin, and a lot of other automation frameworks in the Selenium ecosystem are all meeting at one place, and he's there as well. So which means he's still around, and will be good to see in future conferences as well. So that's a sneak peek, or highlights around Selenium 4, what happened after it released, and also what all it went through. Even though it took a couple of years to get started. All right. So first up is all about relative locators. This is something that originally started with Sahi, a tool. I don't know how many of you know about Sahi. If you know, put it on the chat. Narayan Raman, next thought worker, who has been in early days since Selenium was started, had a concept called Relations API, which are a lovely way of finding elements. And at least in Selenium world, we don't know how many of them are using it, but I know, and I have interacted with people in this Selenium forum, that some of you are using it where there is a web form and tough to crack elements, and you have to use more colloquial or a more simple language to finding elements, rather than fiddling with XPath and CSS. So Relations API from Sahi, it's not very new. It's not a groundbreaking innovation from Selenium. It has been there in the community. Started with Sahi, and then Tycho. I don't know how many of you know about Tycho. Started with ThoughtWorks, and I think the team at Thoughtworks is still maintaining, and they also had something related to relative locators. And we originally called it friendly locators, and we later changed it to relative locators. And what is it all about? As I said, it's a friendly way of locating elements using the terms that we normally use in day-to-day life, like above, the below, to the left of, to the right of, near, right? So imagine you're writing an automation script, and you'll use WebDriver APIs. Typically starts with driver.findElement, and then the by interface is there. And then you typically say whether it's ID or CSS or XPath, right? And then you will inspect the element on the page, and you find the best locator strategy that works for you, or use Selectors Hub by Sanjay, which works brilliantly. And you would use whatever operations that you want to do it. But not all the web pages are very friendly to us, and sometimes it happens that and also not the collaboration happens very friendly with developers. Like, we don't care, very few teams get the pleasure of having IDs built in, or taken into a best practice when they develop. If you're doing that, that's great. If not, I think relative locators will come in handy. Or if any business owners or product owners are looking at your code, they will still be able to understand firstly why they have to look into your code. Well, that's a topic for another day. But the point I'm trying to make is, it is an easy way of locating in elements, and I have a short demo that I wanted to show. But before that, what does it really mean, right? So every element in the DOM, which is the document object model, has a client bounding right. So if you're used to fiddling with um, DevTools protocol, DevTools, so you inspect an element, go onto the console, pick an element, and then if you do dot and then function, you'll get a client bounding right, which will actually show you the x and y coordinates. And that's actually the picture that shows you the element is in the middle, and then it shows the x of left, and then y of top, and then the bottom, and then you actually see the blue dotted lines. That's typically a gray area, and always seems to be challenging, at least from an implementation of Selenium perspective. So we always measure it from a center point of the client bounding rect, right? So that's why I have another picture which shows you 1 and 2, which will clearly give you an idea of how Selenium relative locators will really work if there are very tiny space in between different elements, and if you're using locators like to the left of or to the right of, right? So if you clearly see this one, the element 1 on the blue colored is clearly above Selenium 2, and also the element number 2 is clearly below it. And so you could test around this a bit. I know in the early days when we released Angie Jones, I have found a brilliant bug which we had it, and we solved it. And we're looking forward to more such use cases where you've used it. So if you ask me where will this be really useful, I've personally used it where, say you have web form submission, which is typically there always, right? So and of course insurance code, or whatever you want to type in all the details, and before payment page, or you have a summary sort of a page where you have all the details. So if you look at my name is Manoj Kumar, and then Kumar. So there is a repetition of Kumar, and that's my surname, my dad's name. So that's how you have the repetitions. But sometimes Manoj Kumar will be on my first name as well as in surname. There'll be Kumar, and I wanted to validate if Kumar is actually on surname or not. So for that, I can actually, because I know the test data, right? What we wanted to add in as a surname will actually come in from your test data strategy, whether it's Excel sheet or JSON or whatever you want to follow. But if you wanted to get the value of the label that is to the left of it, because usually you have surname, and then what is the value of it, the first name, and what is the value of it. So on those cases, you can use it, and people use it for fun. I mean, Selenium is for fun. It's just a browser automation framework, and how you use it is up to totally you. So that's how typically Selenium relative locators work. And if you really look at from a code perspective, let me pick this screen. Yeah, I hope it's visible, this one. I have web, sorry, the location. Let me get into it. Relative locators is here. All right, let me cover the DevTools protocol, and then I'll come back so that I can at least cover a little bit of theory portions and how it works, and then get into the technical part of it. Good. So DevTools protocol and WebDriver BiDi. So put it in the chat if you're someone who has already tried WebDriver BiDi. How many of you have tried? I'm looking at the chat. Come on, people, keep it interactive. I'm looking forward to your chats. Not yet, not yet, not me, not with remote WebDriver. That's an interesting point. I will actually touch upon it. Not yet, it's on the list. Okay, perfect. So stay tuned. There's a lot of things that we will cover in this. Right. So DevTools protocol and WebDriver BiDi. I mean, just to give you a background, during the last year, the browser and the testing tools work group, led by David, has been meeting once a month, and we call it the WebDriver BiDi standard group. So in this group, you can find pretty much all the Selenium, members, and as well as browser vendors like Apple, Mozilla, Google, Microsoft. All of them, come together and discuss about what should be the future of the browser standards will look like. And it's an open meeting, anyone can join. I will actually leave the link to it, and you could, if you're interested in learning about it, you could actually take a look at it. um, so you could actually take a look at it. um, so the background about it is, like, we all know W3C WebDriver was a specification, and it takes some time, right? It took some time. It was it was in proposal stage, it was in a draft stage, and it took a couple of years to get into the stage where we call it candidate recommendation, right? So likewise, WebDriver BiDi is a specification, and it'll take some time, but when it happens, it'll bring in a huge benefit, right? So all this work in progress, which is why we would like you to invite, look into the current draft and see, if we wanted to make any features, or any suggestions that you wanted to make it, or you could spot us some use cases where that we have not been considered, but this will be pretty useful for you. So, however, some of the implementations or have already landed in some of the browsers like Firefox, where we are closely working with them to make sure the features are available through different bindings. But more importantly, we are working very carefully on a stable API that can be useful for testing. Right, it's an API that don't require you to update your code, and on every single release we do, that no one break your code in between your versions, and that's one of the things that we have been taken very carefully. That's also the reason why I mentioned Selenium 4 is meant to be a drop in replacement, where you don't have to change so many things, but only minimal things where you need it. As I mentioned, Selenium 4 has already brought in some features from the WebDriver BiDi specifications, like the web authentication, like the mutation observer, which mutation observer meaning ability to capture events via WebDriver BiDi, where how many of you, if you have worked through some of the front end applications, you'll have some DOM mutations. You could capture those as well, and listen into JavaScript exceptions, and last but not the least, have features like network interception. So what is really Chrome DevTools protocol, right? So Chrome DevTools protocol is actually developed to enable a debugger inside Chromium based browsers. So it is actually meant for debugging, to see what is really going on when someone is developing a front end application that is served on browsers like Chrome, right? So if you really see the word itself, it says it's a debugger, which means it's a debugging protocol, which means there'll be a lot of chatty information, will be like chatty meaning a lot of junk information will go in, which really doesn't matter to you as a user or a developer or a tester, right? So this is what happens when you have an automation tool that is built on top of chatty protocol like DevTools protocol, where does it really hurt us? I mean, to a user, not much, because that's what the tools like Cypress, Playwright, and Puppeteer will mask these things behind the scenes, so that you have the performance benefits of it running inside the context of the browser. Unlike the WebDriver BiDi, what we're trying to do is, so the downside of having this DevTools protocol is, it's quite limited to just the Chromium browsers. So some people may argue, and I've seen clients who say pretty much the browser landscape is Chromium, and we are least bothered about cross browser. But that's not the case, right? So every browser has their own browser engine, and things work very differently. But we as a Selenium project haven't been doing a good job in communicating the terms. What does BiDi means, what does CDP means, and what does DevTools, and typically we sometimes use it interchangeably too. So the DevTools protocol allows the tools to instrument, inspect, debug, profile the Chromium, right, which is the engine behind it, and Chrome and any Blink-based browsers. Therefore, it can be very verbose. As I said, it's very chatty, very hard to debug, and it could be have a breaking changes between releases, like DevTools have version 104, 105. So every Chrome version will have their own DevTools version as well. So imagine you're using one of the features of DevTools, like say network performance, or say profiler resource timing, and you're using Chrome driver of 103, and you've updated your bindings to be using 103. And when you're running it in a remote fashion, the Chrome browser may not be the same. It'll be running a different version. So your test will fail, obviously, because you have imported the API that is based off different version, right? So there are some of the challenges like this, and which is what we're trying to work around and bring you a unified, platform where you'll get a seamless experience of having a true cross browser, where WebDriver BiDi will be able to help you do that. So, talking about web authentication, which is part of the WebDriver BiDi, right? So, it is one of the features that people have been asking for since we started the project, and has been, given an ability to authenticate a website. So, I know back in the days, in Selenium RC days or Selenium 3 days, where we have driver.get, the URL, and we used to do admin at the rate of, say, admin or at password, and then followed by the domain.com. That's usually how people used to tackle it, or use tools like AutoIT, or if your Mac, use Apple script to bypass such information, and then get past it, the authentication part, and then start your browser. So it's a hacky way of doing it. So we understood, which is one of the things that we wanted to do it. um, but there is a leak, I mean, but this could leak the credentials, and leave it to open up a lot of security incidents, like a man in middle attack, and leave them in a evidences in the server logs, so the browser has have this functionality. That's unfortunate, because we know people frequently have a particular used to do this. And in Selenium 4, we now have a mechanism to register username and password, and that can be used to authenticate against these sites. um, we'll show you a small code before I do it. So web authentication, as it shows, right? So it is based off and has authentication. Let me go into the code. Yeah. So if you really see the code base, it's nothing but we have has authentication, which is an interface where you have pretty much all the so uh, underneath has authentication. It's nothing but DevTools protocol, right? So we have made sure we remove all the unnecessary information, so that you get a seamless experience. So we have covered it under this interface. So just type in has authentication in Selenium code base, and you will be able to see the code, how it has been used. And if you need any more DevTools API that you wanted to use, but it's not available, this is something that you could use it. So the way that works is, so I'm going to use the internet, the application, which pretty much everyone knows. So what happens is, let me zoom into this. Yeah, so you have basic auth, and then digest authentication, where it'll ask you something like this, where you type in admin, and then admin, it'll help you, congratulations. So that's what the test really does here. It's very pretty straightforward. Name, username, and password, admin, then follow. Let's quickly run it and see. It's the first test. Hope the demo got with me. You're able to see that running. Internet.Heroku app. Cool. So that is very simple. Very straightforward. The documentation is updated, so you could go ahead and have a look at it. So I see some comments on WebDriver IO as well. But yes, Christian covered it yesterday. So WebDriver IO is based on WebDriver specification. So they implement WebDriver spec, but they also got the web APIs, which is nothing but the um, DevTools way of doing stuff as well, which has already been built in. So that's web authentication. And one of the other things that I wanted to show here is let me move it here. So network interception, which is one of the important features. So I don't know how many of you use this, because this is pretty interesting feature. So a common complaint of a Selenium test is that they are slow and flaky. Like, how many of you would have heard that, or how many of you would have complained that? So while the bindings to the browser are excellent, the communication between the client bindings and the browser are excellent, as fully, and because it's basically implementing the W3C WebDriver spec, and it is in the any format of end-to-end test, right? It's suffer mostly flakiness because it is happening over the presentation layer. If you look at the OSI layers from your fundamentals of architecture, the application layer is in the top, and of course it goes through a lot of HTTP calls, and there are a lot of moving parts, right? And there is more possibilities of things going wrong. So one way to resolve this issue is to stub out the backend of the application, right? So how does it happen? Well, we could typically intercept the network traffic in the test and then return a pre-canned response, right? So tools such as Mountbank, by one of my ex colleague Thoughtworker, named Mountebank. I forgot his name, Brandon Byers. So see Mountbank and make it easy for API testing. So typically you would have seen use cases of using mocking in API world, but do you really know you could mock in UI testing as well, like especially around tools like Selenium? If your answer is no, and if you haven't heard before, well, that's exactly the network interception is for, because there might be cases where the UI is ready, but the API is still cooking. Maybe in the microservices world, there is a problem with producer, and there is some problem with consumer. You don't have proper responses coming back, and you don't have the API ready. So with network interception, given it's part of the PyDI protocol already, it gives you mechanisms to stub out the response to the request in the driver, right? So this is simply done by applying a specific route, which I'll show you, which will help you capture network events, and it's simply used to mock the front end UI. So going back to the demo again, I have network interception. So for this, what I'm gonna show you is, let me show you what the code does first, so that you all know how this really works. Automation bookstore.dev. So if you really see, it's basically a demo website. I've seen Angie Jones used a lot in the past, and I really loved it. So I'm gonna use the same website, where it's basically a website. And so imagine you have a website like this, where say this is more as like an e-commerce website, right? So um, imagine this is coming in from different sellers. Maybe some of the services are down and you're not getting the images properly, and most of the books actually, imagine the titles are not here, which means you're not able to see what book is all about, right? Maybe there is a pirated version of a book, or what is, of course you look at the cover of the book, right, to make sure you're buying the right book. So what if you're able to mock this by having some common image, like let's replace it with the Selenium logo, right? So let me run it quickly for you, and then I'll speak about what the code does. So it'll open up the automation browser, and I've given it thread.sleep, and actually there you go. So you see all the images have completely transformed into Selenium logo. So that's what it does, all right? So let's look at the code for a moment, right? So what it does: intercept with new content. So all I've given is a path. Like as I said, under resources, I have Selenium logo, which I wanted to replace because that's what I found. I don't want it. So for some reasons, the images on the book didn't come up properly, and I wanted to change it. So and then I go to this website and I maximize it. And then so the real piece of things happen over here, right? So what happens is, route as a concept, you could go check it about it. It's within the Selenium package. So all I'm trying to find is adding a header of a content type, and I wanted it to be PNG, converting it to string, and then sending it as a stream of bytes, so that it intercepts over the call HTTP call, and able to completely help us mock the complete images out of it. So this is one way of doing stuff. The other way of doing, we could do a lot more with network interception. So if this is really interesting for you, go ahead and comment on the chat on how else you could use it, because people know network interception as a concept exists, but not quite too sure about how to effectively use it. Well, this is one of the use cases that we typically use, and I've seen. So when I was before lambdatest, I was working with Thoughtworks, and I've had a number of clients. So in one of the use cases where it was a pure microservices based architecture, where it was a food delivery app, and the producer team was sitting in a different part of the world, and the consumer team was sitting based out of India. And we were using Mountbank in the API side of things, and also in the UI. So place we didn't have a proper mechanism to do it. So we were, I think, at that stage, the Selenium 4 API was really very early in the stage, but we tried that out, and it really worked in some places. But now that we have a lot matured way of doing stuff, it will be really helpful. So it'll be possible to intercept any messages and modify responses that the browser will receive. So you know how the browser really works, right? So you request something, it goes to the server, and response, you'll get a response back. So you can literally manipulate and modify any response that comes back from the server. Like, as I said, Selenium is a browser automation framework, and what you have to do is with its power. It's completely up to you. So likewise, network interception is a wonderful feature, and go ahead and do whatever you wanted to do with it. And also, if you look at my previous slide, on this slide, I have a pointing which shows a BiDi, right? So here I'm trying to give a distinction between which feature is part of a BiDi and which feature is not part of BiDi. So the features that you see that are part of BiDi are safe to use, so that you will not be affected in the future if anything changes in the Selenium. So for the features where you don't see BiDi, for example, this one, geolocation, where I say DevTools, you will have a problem in the future, because this is directly using the raw CDP APIs. So geolocation, I mean, it's not new. People would have seen, using it for different cases. Put it on the chat if you're someone who's, already using geolocation for your testing needs, content-based needs. Like, say, typical example could be e-commerce websites and multinational insurance companies, where they wanted to change the content of their websites based on the location that they're viewing from, right? So you could emulate or simulate the location that you wanted to put the location or change the content. So what I have in demo is, it's a simple browserleaks.com.geo. So in the Selenium Conf, Marat and I ran probably more than half an hour and a half ensemble testing on the very same application. It's already on YouTube. You can go and check it out. So what it does is, if you really see, I open this website, browserleaks.com and geo, and it actually shows where I'm sitting right now, which is sector 62, Noida, which is pretty much shows lambdatest headquarters in India is at Noida sector 62, and that's what it really says. But if I wanted to emulate with some other location, so imagine that is something that I'm given. So you could go to literally any place in the maps at Google and say, Greenland has been my dream destination. Hopefully I'll visit one day. So I click over here and I get some coordinates, right? So I can copy paste this on the latitude and longitude over here. And then we have minus 51. Okay, I'm gonna comment the asset, because on the previous test we were setting a different one. So let's hope for the best. If not, I'll try setting it. So the browserleaks.com.geo, it opens up, and yeah, the test is passed. It was too fast. We didn't see where it does. So maybe I can just do, I'll undo that bit, put it back to the same latitude and longitude. I'll just do bed.sleep. Oops, don't follow this. It's a bad practice, but just for the sake of showing you what really happens behind the scenes, just adding it here. So let's run it again. 52, 13. There you go. So we have actually mimicked a location that's based out of Germany. And on your session, I have, say, the location should contain brighter, and that's what it had in the browser. So that's how really geolocation works. It's simple, it's quite powerful. But as I said, the clear distinction that you could make looking at the code on figuring out when I'm using BiDi, when am I using DevTools, if you're confused about it. But look, so when you're using features like this, which has devtools.send, you're using DevTools raw API. If you're using um, DevTools API, which has wrappers that are built on within the Selenium code base, which will have things like network interceptor, or say has authentication, or has DevTools, which means you got it covered for the future as well. So that's how you could relate it on, how you're prepared for the future. So, a quick check down on timing. How am I doing? So it's about 35 minutes. Okay, cool. So, important pieces of observability. So talking about observability, I mean, there's three pillars we say, right? So logs, metrics, and traces. So I'll never forget a time when I had to debug systems by, typically SSHing into servers and parsing the logs. We having, standard monitoring infrastructure metrics like CPU, memory, and networking, but each of them were telling everything was fine. While an external health check tool was telling us the system was intermittently down, right? So there were absolutely no place to find out where has something gone wrong. So telemetry consists of those outputs. It's data generated by your system that document its state. So the telemetry gets generated because of instrumentation coding tooling, where it'll tell you about the system's health. Right. So telemetry gets, where does it tell? How does the telemetry get its information? Is based on the instrumentation which you want to do. So that's in short about telemetry. I'm not deep diving into it. So I have a talk exclusively more detailed on it on YouTube. You could check it out, or we could post a link a little later. But now we have integrated Open Telemetry APIs, which is an observability framework for cloud native software within Selenium 4, which means the hard part of it is already done. So when someone says we have observability built in, what they mean is that they have instrumented the code, and later, based on the instrumentation, they're able to visualize something good enough where they see the complete system health. Right. So the first part of it, the instrumentation part, we have already done it in the Selenium code base. So all you have to do it is start the Selenium grid in a way where we capture those inputs and visualize it in a neat manner. So we originally started this supporting only on the server side of things, which may not be very useful for automation testers, because what happens within Selenium Grid may not be of interest to you. Maybe it's of interest for people like DevOps who, religiously look at the resource utilization. Say if you're running it in AWS or running it in-house grids, so for them it will be a groundbreaking way of looking at an end-to-end trace. So if you heard talk Vinayak Ekde, who was telling about observability and how it is key momentum for our microservices, and that's what really it does as well. So given the advent of microservices and way of developing, we also wanted to bring in the observability framework where you'll be able to see the nitty gritties of what are really happening when you request when your code is actually executing on a browser. Right. So thanks to Simon, who started this observability piece, and then Pooja from Browser Stack took over it, and then Alexi for adding huge shout out for Alexi, because he added the client side part of it, which is what more interesting as a user. So it started as a server side, and then now we have a client side part of it, where when I show a demo, it will be a lot more easy to you. So a quick recap in Selenium Grid 3 how things were. So you had a test, and then you had a browser where you will have your Selenium server and then a browser driver in between, or you might use in-house grid or a cloud vendors like lambdatest, Sauce Labs, Browser Stack, and all of these vendors that are available for you to use. So it's a plain format like hub and node. So a lot of things might go wrong. It's still obsolete. It's still black box. You don't know what happening. Every command that you issue, like so many clicks, so many select APIs or whatever you use, a lot of things that goes behind the scenes, right, over HTTP, and sometimes you don't know where it goes wrong. So for that very pieces, very piece of information, we have changed the complete architecture of Selenium Grid 4, where we have so many moving parts like router, session queue, session map, event bus, and distributor, and then you have nodes. I know it might be confusing if I said so. We have an extensive documentation in Selenium website. You could go and check it out. So I wanted to give an animated view of how the flow happens when you write a code in Selenium 4 or Selenium 3 and use Grid 4, and how really the from the client your mission might sends instruction to router, and when does it reach session queue, when does it reach session map, what does it really do. So if you're keen, and I've recently heard from one of my friend that recently people started asking about it in interviews, which was fascinating to me, because yeah, it's good to know what things happening around, but not I mean, knowing about what session map internally does will be too overwhelming. But yeah, I mean, so be prepared and learn about it, right? So the first thing first is the router. So router faces the internet and it takes incoming traffic and then figures out where to send, right? Which means, say you're starting a new session and having driver.get. So that is the very first moment, right? So the router will first get that incoming traffic, and then it will figure out. So obviously, what happens in a Selenium script is, we wanted to, figure out whether we want to create a new session, or is the user asking to attach it to the existing session. So that's what the grid will do as well. Well, if the request belongs to an existing session, the router will send the session ID into the session map, and the session map will return, the node. You can see. So if it's session map no, it'll go to the session map, and then for the router again, and then router will pick up based on the session ID, and it'll attach to the node, and you can continue your execution for whatsoever matter, right? And if it is a new request, the router will forward it to a new session queue here, right, which will add it to the new session queue. So upon successfully adding the request to the queue, the new session queue here will trigger an event through event bus, right? So the distributor will then pick up this event and pulse the queue, and it now attempts to create a session. So if you really see, this is all typically, so event based and all of this is nothing but an event driven architecture that we typically have, like say imagine Kafka, Netty, and all this, things that happen in microservices. It's exactly what's happening here as well. Now what happens, when and so if the requested capabilities does not exist, so what's happened next is, like when the session is created, it's been added as part of a new session queue. So what really happens is, we will really check if the requested capabilities really match. Does it mean, like, if a user wants to run in a specific version of a browser or a machine, it will actually figure out, do I really have those capability, right? If not, then I should reject it, right? And that's what it really does. It'll throw you an error saying, the requested capability does not exist. So many of you would have tried to run, and say if you're trying to run an IE, say your capability is Chrome options, like IE options, and you're running a test on a Mac. Of course you can't have an IE browser on a Mac, so of course it will fail, and that's what the client error will throw you. On the positive scenario, if it exists, then automatically it'll find a node and run it as part of it. So after getting all the available start session, the distributor passes a new session to the via event bus. So if you see, event bus will be the busiest thing, where it'll collect all these things that are happening, and new session queue is also the thing that keeps, on keeps track on what how the new session queue comes in. And session map, you can consider that as more like a database of different sessions. Say you're running 1,000 tests, and 1,000 session IDs will be there. Where does it go? Well, typically it goes everything as part of the session map, and that's what really keeps track of how things go. I hope it was really helpful. If not, feel free to chat with me later. I'm happy to explain. And we have, as I said, we have made a documentation, clean step-by-step information on how it will look like, and you could go learn about it. So as I said, so Selenium Server is instrumented with tracing using OpenTelemetry. So every request that you send through will be traced from start to the end, and each trace will consist of a series of spans, as a request. And the good thing is, we have covered both the client and server part of it. So what does it really mean, Manoj? I mean, if you ask me as a user, how it is useful, I mean, it'll be really useful from perspective of, a lot of people talk about shift right, and what happens, if you run your tests on a higher environments, like pre-prod and even prod for two instances, and say synthetic monitoring, for example, where you use any services for that, or maybe you are super confident about your test and have whitelisted an IP from where your test is running, and you could run a script from different IPs and make sure your application is up to date. And those cases, observability traces will really help you, because it will tell you where things go wrong. So in just in case if you see 6 errors is shown, but on the IDE or your logs, it will just show you, for an example, it will just tell you this element is not located. Well, that's simple and good enough. That's what really a user want. But for some reasons, the element really exists, but you don't know why it failed. I'm sure a lot of you would have been facing that sort of issues, and maybe it has passed in one of the environments but not another. So on really those sort of edge cases, the observability metrics will really help you to debug that, because as lower environments behave differently, and higher environments might differ differently. I know I'm talking about lower and higher environments in the age of Docker containers, but I'm talking about being more practical, and sometimes it happens. And even in Docker containers, for that matter, if you replicate it using k8s, you will sometimes have to face that. So in nutshell, the message here is, the visualization of traces will help you, nail down those edge cases, and you'll be really able to see how it does, behind the scenes. I have a demo, but I'll look at the time and I'll be able to, see if I'm able to run it or not towards the end. But I wanted to cover, what is next in Selenium 4 as part of Docker Selenium, right? So thanks to the community, up until now we have had Docker Selenium images, that will run based on Intel based machines like Apple Mac or Windows, right? So if you're already using Docker Selenium, give a thumbs up or put it on the chat. We'll really love to see how many of you are already using. But the interesting thing is, given the new innovations from Apple, right? So they've been doing it every year. So they have their own architecture, like ARM architecture, M1 Max. The existing Selenium, Docker Selenium, will not work, right? So even if you are using any Docker, it might not work. You need to specially build images catering to this architecture. So that's where, James did a wonderful job by creating, Docker Selenium arms, Selenium, if I pronounce it right. So you can go check it out, where you could use that. And not only just Apple M1. So there are platforms like Raspberry Pi where you wanted to run it. So architectures. So this Selenium ARM has been built with images catering to different architectures like Linux ARM64, or Linux ARM v7 like ARM HF, and Linux AMD 64. A lot of these architectures now support Selenium ARM, and it's available as part of a Selenium HQ community project. So if you have used something around Selenium that will help people, reach out to us, and we will gladly, make it as part of the Selenium official Selenium HQ community project, so that we will support you develop the project, and whatever, help you might need. So that's one of the things, thanks to the community again. And a very recent information, it was actually today morning we announced it on the blog again by James, is we can now able to test dev and beta channel browsers in Docker Selenium. Until now we were able to only test stable versions and browser versions on Docker Selenium. Now that we have added additions where you could go ahead and still check beta and dev channels as well. How many of you have been proactively testing in beta dev? If you are someone who's been doing that and I've been waiting for that feature, well, here you go, you already have that feature now. So that's some of the pieces about Selenium 4 that I'm excited about. I wanted to recap and show you some demo, and leave you with some examples on how you could use it in day-to-day life. um, what is the future? Well, future is unwritten. If we don't know the future, it's very exciting. If you know, it's not exciting, right? Yeah, but we can't help you. I know everyone is excited. So Selenium 4, I mean, even we said this in the Selenium 4 keynote. So we are going with a batteries included approach, and that's because we heard you, where we are bringing in the Selenium manager. How many of you have used Boni Garcia's WebDriver manager, which was a lifesaver for many of them, including me? Boni has been kind enough to donate that project to the Selenium community for all of us. So thank you so much, Boni. And we are actually merging that code base into Selenium trunk, so that we you don't have to use an external dependency like where Boni used to host it on the Maven repository. Now it will be part of Selenium, so that we'll be able to manage the browser versions for you. And moving forward, we will be upgrading totally from Java 8 to Java 11 as being a standard. And as Jim Evans was saying about, one thing that he would change is making it async, async await, is one of the things that we look forward to doing it in .NET as well as in Python. And we've spoken enough about WebDriver BiDi with some of the features, and Christian and Diego adding it in yesterday's session. So a lot of things are cooking up. Even Jesslyn from Google showed in the session around BiDi and what's been cooking. So BiDi is the future that looking at strongly, bringing in a true cross-browser platform, including tools like Playwright and Puppeteer and Cypress and Selenium. I'm not sure about Cypress, but at least Playwright, Puppeteer, and Selenium for sure will have the capability to run it via WebDriver BiDi, right? Because all of this same team who develop Playwright, who develop Puppeteer in Google, Microsoft by Playwright, and then Selenium team, we're all working together to bring it at that specification. It might be a little slow, but when it happens, it'll be the best standard ever, and Selenium will be there to available for you to use that. So from a Selenium community standpoint, as we said in the keynote as well, so we're bringing up an official Selenium ambassador program, and we wanted, I mean, a lot of people um, have been over the years um, producing content like blogs or video tutorials, and a lot of it have been evangelizing Selenium in in some way, and we wanted to recognize that effort finally now. It should have been earlier, but never too late, and we wanted to highlight that efforts, and we will be reaching out to you. We are working out some guidelines on how we should do that. And as I said, Selenium 5, the next version, we wanted to call it as a release that includes your voice, right? That's also the reason why the Selenium Test Automation Summit is happening as we speak in Berlin, and we'll also have a future versions in US and all other places as well, and India hopefully sometime, where the idea is to bring all the Selenium based testing ecosystem, like say Selenide, WebDriver IO, Fluent Selenium, Boa Constrictor, CodeCept.js, Serenity.js, Pylanium from Carlos. So we have Capybara, Water. So all of these, imagine all of these open source developers gathering at one place, and that's what we're trying to do. Right, and it's already happening in Berlin as we speak today, and we will be having more such events very near to you, and we'll be looking for volunteers support to host it in your region, and we look forward to all your support. And fine, thank you so much for tuning into my talk, and I hope this was helpful. And yeah, I mean, if I don't know if we are already overshoot the time for questions, or happy to be hanging around in the lounge area. What do you want to do, Sparsh?
Hey, hey Manoj, that was a really insightful session about Selenium and its future.
Thank you.
Can we quickly take a few questions and rest of the we can do it afterwards?
Sure, sure, yeah.
Okay. So starting with the first question, it was asked by Trevor. Playwright is CDP, Puppeteer is CDP. Will Selenium be pure CDP?
Good question. No, not at all, Trevor. As I said, so Selenium really literally stands out. I mean, if you ask me, I think this is something that we have discussed yesterday as well. The way how Playwright works and Puppeteer works is very different. And if it works for you, please go ahead and use it. So I'm not telling you to use Selenium or Playwright or Puppeteer. So as I said, DevTools protocol, the name itself says it's a protocol that is used for dev tools for debugging and all of it purpose. So obviously it'll be a little faster than Selenium for sure, because it is working inside the context of a browser. But unlike in Selenium, it's a W3C spec, it's a W3C WebDriver standard, where it will work outside the context of a browser, where it'll mimic how a user will do. So you decide what sort of automation test cases you wanted to do, mimic as a user would do, and what sort of cases would you. So that's why, I mean, a lot of people like Richard Bradshaw or and Christian and a lot of people have been telling, and we are working for the community. So of course we want you to use the best what it works for you. So if you take developers, yes, they are using front end applications, so they will of course look for faster feedbacks within web application, what is happening. So they might go ahead and use Puppeteer and Playwright, and if you're a QA, you wanted to mimic a user experience, you get to go ahead and use Selenium. So yeah, long story short, Selenium will not be pure CDP, and that's why we're bringing a vendor platform neutral protocol called WebDriver BiDi.
Moving to the next question.
Yep.
Is Selenium 4 support added to lambdatest?
Good question. My team should be right here. Yes, just joking. Yes, we are supporting, and yeah, if you have any issues, please reach out.
This question is asked by Ruth. How long before you think WebDriver BiDi becomes used as commonplace?
A really tough question. It's more like looking up to the sky and looking when the rain will come. Sorry, that's a bad joke. So Ruth, so as I said, specification takes some time, because it goes through lots of things, and as I said, some changes have already been landed in browsers like Firefox, and people are working at. I think Puppeteer just released their roadmap today, and Simon Stewart has been tweeting around it. So you can look at the roadmap and see how Puppeteer team is planning around, and Selenium team also planning around how do we do it. Uh, there's no really a date. If you ask me, like how Simon used to say, next Christmas and next Chinese New Year, I'll probably say next, you know, whatever festival that you would like. So go ahead and use that. But it's not a really responsible answer, I know, but that's how it really works, because it's a long way ahead, I would say.
This next question is asked by Rajinder Singh. How different relative locators is different from parent sibling concept already having in Selenium 3?
Yeah, I mean, I haven't personally used or had a necessity of using parent sibling, except few applications back in days where it was completely Ajax based, or I don't know how many of you used been in the era of extended JavaScript like EXTJS. That was my very first application when I started my career, and I have to automate that. So on those cases, I've used parent sibling. Um, so it's a we have simplified it, I would say, put it simple. So it's a simplified way of allocating elements rather than you have to do a lot of. So I would say parent sibling is more of over engineering and making sure you dissect every element, go underneath and do it, rather than that simply use relative locator.
Uh, let's take up the last question. Uh, with Selenium 4, is it all mandatory to migrate all the Selenium 3 projects?
Well, I would say yeah. Why not? Because we have got all exciting features, and why are you waiting still? So you should go ahead and upgrade, because it's always good to be on the versions, right? So you wouldn't be using the expired products in your day-to-day life. So likewise, I mean, that doesn't mean Selenium 3 is expired, but you don't want to miss out the features that we have been adding. And say if you're using still Selenium 3, or any features, if you're raising an issue, the priority will be little less, because we are moving towards the future in Selenium 4, and we're already talking about Selenium 5, right? If you're already in Selenium 3, I think it's a high time you should look forward to upgrading it to Selenium 4. And if you go to selenium.dev and documentation, we already have some guidelines around how to move Selenium 3 code into Selenium 4. As I said, it's a drop-in replacement. There is no huge code changes. It's just a couple of changes like weights, and then the way how you start a browser. Only those things have been changed, and you should look at it. We have a fantastic documentation, thanks to documentation team.
Thank you, Manoj. Thank you for taking the questions.
Sure,
I
sure.
hope you find all this session insightful. Please do reach out if you have any more questions, and we will happy to answer them. We would be also hosting all our recorded sessions on YouTube, so you can go back and listen to them again and also share with your peers. Till then, happy testing and have a great day.
Sure, thank you so much, Pash, and thanks everyone and the opportunity. See you next time around.
Bye, everyone.